Emma never thought of her life as unfair until the day she realized other children had something she didn't even understand properly: choice, the simple ability to decide what to do with their time, where to go, and who to become. She didn't go to school, not because she refused, but because life had quietly removed that option before she was old enough to question it, before she even knew it was something she could want. Her mornings didn't begin with uniforms or neatly packed bags, they began with responsibility, with movement, with the quiet understanding that there was always something that needed to be done. She moved through her days with a kind of focus that didn't belong to her age, as if she had skipped an entire phase of childhood and stepped directly into something heavier. Yet, strangely, she never allowed herself to feel completely defeated. There was always something inside her that resisted that feeling, something small but unbreakable, like a seed buried deep beneath the ground, waiting for the right moment to grow. There were moments when Emma would pause, not because she had time to rest, but because her mind needed space to breathe. She would stand by the window and watch the outside world, observing the rhythm of people moving with purpose, children laughing without hesitation, lives unfolding in ways she couldn't quite relate to. For a few seconds, she would imagine herself among them, walking freely, carrying dreams instead of duties. But she never let herself stay in that imagined world for too long. She had learned early that dreaming without direction could become a trap, something that made reality feel even heavier. So instead of longing endlessly, she began to observe carefully. She listened to conversations she wasn't part of, memorized words she didn't fully understand, and paid attention to how people spoke, how they reacted, how they expressed themselves. She stored everything quietly, like pieces of a puzzle she didn't yet know how to assemble. What made Emma different was not her struggle, many people struggled, but the way she carried it. There was no loud defiance, no dramatic rebellion, just a quiet refusal to accept that her circumstances defined her limits. People around her had settled into their routines, accepting life as something fixed, something that couldn't be changed. Emma couldn't explain why, but she saw things differently. To her, life felt unfinished, like a story still being written, and she believed, even without proof, that she had a part in shaping what came next. This belief didn't come from encouragement or inspiration, no one had told her she could be more. It came from somewhere deeper, something instinctive, something that didn't need permission to exist. One evening, while going through things that had long been forgotten, Emma found a few loose pages tucked away in a corner. They were worn, creased, and nearly useless in the eyes of anyone else. But to her, they felt important. She couldn't explain why she picked them up or why she didn't throw them away like everything else, but something about them held her attention. That night, she sat quietly with those pages and a small, broken pencil. At first, she didn't know what to do. She traced lines absent-mindedly, then shapes, then letters she barely remembered seeing somewhere. It was messy, uncertain, and far from perfect, but it was also the first time she felt like she was doing something for herself, something that wasn't just about surviving the day. Days turned into weeks, and those pages slowly filled with writing. At first, it was imitation, copying words she had seen or heard, repeating them until they felt familiar. Then it became something more. She began to experiment, forming her own sentences, expressing thoughts she didn't know she had. There were mistakes everywhere, uneven lines, misspelled words, incomplete ideas, but Emma didn't see them as failures. To her, they were evidence of effort, proof that she was trying, and trying was something she had learned never to underestimate. Without realizing it, she had begun building something powerful within herself: discipline, patience, focus. These were not things anyone had taught her, but they were shaping her more deeply than any lesson could. Of course, the journey was not smooth. There were days when exhaustion made everything feel pointless, when her hands felt too tired to hold the pencil, when her mind refused to focus. On those days, the voice of doubt became louder, asking questions she couldn't easily answer. What was the point of all this effort? Who would ever see it? Would it change anything at all? For a moment, those questions would linger, heavy and persistent. But then, almost instinctively, she would push through. Not with excitement or confidence, but with determination. Even if she wrote only one word, even if she only traced a single line, she refused to let the habit break completely. Somewhere inside her, she understood that consistency, no matter how small, was more powerful than bursts of motivation. As time passed, something subtle began to change. It wasn't visible to others, not at first. To them, Emma was still the same girl, moving through the same routines, carrying the same responsibilities. But inside, her world was shifting. Her thoughts became clearer, her awareness sharper. She started noticing patterns, how actions led to consequences, how persistence created results, how even the smallest efforts, repeated over time, could lead to something meaningful. She began to understand herself better, to recognize her own strength, not as something extraordinary, but as something reliable, something she could depend on even when everything else felt uncertain. One day, someone remarked casually that Emma would never become anything significant, that without education, her future was already decided. The words were not said with anger or cruelty, they were simply spoken as if they were obvious, undeniable facts. But those words lingered. For a brief moment, Emma felt something inside her falter, a small crack forming in the foundation she had been building. What if they were right? What if all her effort meant nothing in the end? The thought was uncomfortable, unsettling. But instead of avoiding it, she faced it. She sat with that doubt, examined it, and then, slowly, she made a choice. She would not let someone else's belief become her reality. That night, she returned to her pages with a different kind of focus. There was no anger, no need to prove anything to anyone else, just a quiet decision to continue. She wrote more than she ever had before, not because she suddenly believed in success, but because she refused to accept failure as inevitable. That moment marked a shift in her mindset. She stopped measuring herself by what she lacked and started valuing what she was building. She realized that while she couldn't control her starting point, she had complete control over her effort, her direction, and her willingness to keep going. Her writing evolved over time. What started as simple copying turned into expression. She began to write about her thoughts, her observations, her experiences. At first, her words were uncertain, scattered, but gradually they became more structured, more confident. Writing became more than just a habit, it became a way for her to understand the world, to process her emotions, to make sense of everything she had been through. It gave her a voice, even if no one else was listening. Emma still faced challenges. Her circumstances didn't suddenly improve, and life didn't become easier. There were still difficult days, still moments of frustration and exhaustion. But something fundamental had changed. She no longer saw herself as someone stuck in a situation she couldn't escape. She saw herself as someone in the process of becoming, someone who was actively shaping her own future, even if the results were not immediately visible. Sometimes, she would stand by the window again, watching the world move just as it always had. But her perspective was different now. She no longer felt like she was on the outside looking in. She understood that her path was not lesser, just different. The struggles she faced were not signs that she was falling behind, but evidence that she was being shaped in a way that comfort could never achieve. She had learned something that many people never fully understand, that strength is not built in easy moments, but in the quiet, consistent effort to keep going when nothing feels certain. And without realizing it fully, Emma had already begun to rise, not in a way that others could immediately see, but in a way that would eventually change everything. Emma's life did not suddenly become easier, but something inside her had already changed in a way that made her feel less trapped by it. The same responsibilities still existed, the same tiring routine repeated itself every day, and the same quiet struggles followed her like shadows that never fully disappeared. Yet she no longer carried them with the same emptiness that once weighed her down. Something within her had begun to stand quietly against all of it. It was not loud, not dramatic, but steady, like a small flame that refused to be blown out no matter how strong the wind became. Every morning she woke up to the same reality, but her mind no longer interpreted it as a dead end. Instead, she saw it as a space she could move through differently, a space where even small effort had meaning. Her notebook had slowly transformed into something far greater than paper and ink. It became her private world, her escape, and her training ground all at once. What began as uncertain scribbles had now grown into structured thoughts, longer reflections, and more expressive writing. She no longer wrote just to pass time, she wrote to understand herself. Some days she filled pages with questions she didn't know how to answer, and other days she filled them with observations about life that surprised even her. The notebook held her confusion, her pain, her curiosity, and slowly, it also began to hold her strength. Each page became a silent record of her progress, even when she herself didn't notice it immediately. As weeks turned into months, Emma started noticing a change that felt subtle but powerful. The more she wrote, the more she began to think differently. Her mind, once overwhelmed by uncertainty, started forming clearer connections. She began to understand that learning was not only about being taught, but also about paying attention, asking questions, and refusing to stop thinking. Without realizing it, she had entered a path of self-education that no one had assigned to her, no one had graded, and no one had even acknowledged, but it was real, and it was transforming her from within. She began to see that intelligence is not always inherited or given, sometimes it is built slowly through persistence and awareness. There were still days when everything felt heavy. On those days, even the smallest tasks felt exhausting, and her thoughts became clouded with doubt. She would sit quietly, staring at her notebook without opening it, wondering if any of it truly mattered. The world outside continued as always, unaffected by her efforts, and that silence sometimes made her feel invisible. But something had changed inside her response to those moments. Earlier, she would stop for days, sometimes longer. Now, she allowed herself to feel tired, but not to quit. Even if she wrote only a few lines, even if her thoughts were incomplete, she refused to disconnect completely from the path she had built for herself. One evening, a moment occurred that quietly reshaped her understanding of everything she had been going through. She overheard a conversation again, casual words spoken without intention to harm, but they carried the same old belief, that people without formal education had limited futures, that their lives were already defined by what they lacked. In the past, such words would have lingered in her mind for days, slowly turning into doubt. But this time, something different happened. She felt the words, but she did not absorb them. Instead, she observed them, as if she was watching someone else's opinion rather than accepting it as truth. That night, Emma opened her notebook earlier than usual. There was no emotional collapse, no internal battle like before, only clarity. She began to write with a calm intensity she had never experienced before. Her words were no longer just reflections of her pain, they were statements of understanding. She wrote about how life often judges people too early, how circumstances are mistaken for limits, and how silence is often misunderstood as lack of ability. Her writing was not perfect, but it was honest, and more importantly, it was hers. In that moment, she was not just a girl trying to survive, she was a mind trying to express, trying to build meaning from experience. Slowly, Emma's internal world began to reorganize itself. She stopped seeing her life as a collection of disadvantages and started seeing it as a process of development. She noticed how discipline had quietly become part of her routine, how observation had turned into habit, and how thinking deeply had become natural rather than forced. She no longer needed external motivation to write, it had become something she returned to instinctively, like breathing. Even when no one acknowledged her efforts, she felt them building something within her that could not be taken away. The world around her, however, remained unchanged in appearance. The same paths, the same house, the same routine continued. But her perception of it had shifted completely. What once felt like limitation now felt like foundation. She began to understand something she had never been taught directly, that growth is not always visible. Sometimes it happens quietly, without applause, without recognition, and without immediate results. Sometimes the most important transformations are the ones that no one notices until much later. Over time, Emma became more reflective, more aware of her own inner changes. She began to recognize that resilience is not a single decision but a repeated choice. Every time she wrote instead of quitting, every time she observed instead of assuming, every time she continued instead of stopping, she was reinforcing something within herself that was slowly becoming unshakable. It was not confidence in the traditional sense, it was something deeper, something steadier. It was trust in her own ability to continue, even without guarantees. One day, while standing by the window she had once looked through with sadness, she realized that her perspective had changed completely. The same view no longer made her feel left out of life. Instead, it reminded her that every person she saw was also carrying unseen struggles, invisible efforts, and private battles. She understood that everyone was moving at different speeds, building different versions of themselves, shaped by different circumstances. And for the first time, she no longer measured her worth against others. That realization settled in her quietly, but permanently. She was not behind. She was not incomplete. She was not defined by what she had missed. She was in the process of becoming someone stronger than the version of herself she had once imagined possible. And in that silent understanding, Emma finally felt something she had never truly felt before, not happiness, not excitement, but peace. A calm, steady peace that came from knowing she was no longer just surviving her life, she was building it.